Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallace for America. This episode is with Noah Wall of the State Initiative or State Leadership Initiative organization, shall I say. And what you're going to find out about what he's working on in individual states is not only going to impress you as something that you might want to bring to your state. So we're going to talk about what his initiative does with many other states, what his organization does, rather. And then we're going to go to the federal level and talk about some things that are happening on a federal level. And then as we close out, we're going to talk about NGOs and the bureaucratic state, how it's growing, and what his organization is doing to shrink it. You're going to want to hear lots of really good information in this jam-packed episode of my show at William Wallace for America, brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Please switch your cell phone service to Patriot Mobile by going to patriotmobile.com/WWFA. Noah, thank you so much for joining my show today. I appreciate you.
It is so good to be on. Thank you so much for having me, William.
Well, I had the privilege of getting to meet you in person in Baton Rouge when you came and spoke, and I was just delighted and felt very informed after hearing you speak. And that's why I wanted to bring you on my show here today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I love what you guys are doing in Louisiana. I think that there's a lot of exciting things happening in Louisiana, and and we are, my organization, the State Leadership Initiative, is excited to be helping out in the state, and would love to chat with you about what we're doing.
Well, let's do that. I've got your website scrolling at the bottom while you tell us a little bit about it, and tell us about your organization and what you're working on.
Yeah, so we're a new organization. It's stateleadership.org if you're interested in checking us out. We were founded just over a year ago, and our purpose is to work with red states to help make them into the vision of conservative governance that I think the people of those states think they're voting for every 4 years, and more often than not are not actually receiving, once they elect people who campaign on smaller government. So what do I mean by that? Well, red states have a very well-deserved reputation, for example, in having lower taxes. The overall red state tax burden compared to blue states is about 20% less. So the conservative movement, conservative leaders have been fighting for 50 years on trying to lower taxes in Republican-held states, and they've been very successful at that. Again, 20% overall lower tax burden than your average blue state is a great achievement. States like Louisiana have done tremendous jobs on the issue of life. You guys have effectively outlawed abortion in the state of Louisiana. That is a great accomplishment. And other red states have done similar work trying to get towards that goal. You guys are definitely a leader on that one. On issues like the Second Amendment, we've had a lot of wins. Where we have failed as a movement is actually to shrink the size of government. We have spent less. We have lowered taxes, but we've actually not decreased the size of state governance compared to blue states, and which is kind of counterintuitive, but it's true. So red states overall have a bureaucracy size. So, we're talking about, state agencies, overall size of, the public sector employees in red states are oftentimes not lower, not smaller. The government is not overall smaller in red states versus blue states. You can look at California's got the largest in the country, but if you take states like, Kansas or you look at size like Kansas or Missouri versus say Maryland and Connecticut, Republican states end up having these massive bureaucracies. We have university systems in red states, the public university systems that have larger bureaucracy. I'm not talking about professors. I'm talking about bureaucracy size. So, grant administrators, kind of the people behind the scenes, much larger bureaucracy sizes per capita than blue states. So in terms of like actual government efficiency, red states have tremendously failed on that promise. If you look at regulatory burden, just as, that sounds boring, but like, this is like, how hard is it to actually build something in red states? It is more often than not, not much easier. The regulatory burden in red states is quite often just as high as in blue states. There's a lot of, there's some good examples, but overall, like, red states have failed to actually change the structure and size of government in a very positive way. And I'm going to give you one more sort of example. Gavin Newsom likes to go around and, he'll say that, California is a net tax exporter, but red states like, and states like Louisiana are a massive problem with this, have these massive welfare systems, where you'll have red states with like 40+% of the population on Medicaid. And he's right when he makes that, he lies through his teeth about most things, but his criticisms of Gavin Newsom, and a lot of the other left-wing sort of critiques of red states, it's true. Like, it's actually an accurate statement to say that red states have these massive dependencies on the federal government. So a lot of red states will have between 30 and 40% of their state budgets are federal tax dollars that are shipped into the state to pay for things like Medicaid, to pay for things like food stamps, Section 8 housing, et cetera. And so I think that, part of our mission as an organization is to work and try and provide solutions that reduce the size of the welfare state in this country, because most Americans have no idea the percentage of the population that are dependent on tax dollars to get by. And that's a failure on our part to not actually solve those problems. So anyway, so those are some examples. There's a lot of reasons for this, but the bottom line is we need to do a better job of making government more efficient. We need to do a better job at actually solving the bureaucratic bloat that we've got in red states. We need government to be much smaller. And the good news is there are examples of states that have done tremendous jobs in fixing this. So our solutions as an organization quite oftentimes are pointing to other states and saying, hey, these reforms have already been implemented. Let us help you reform your state in a way that's already been done successfully. So anyway, so I'm happy to expand on any part of that, but that's really our mission, is to get into these states and actually help them enact these reforms and ensure that we are actually living up to, the small government mantra that we love to promote. We may have, done a better job than a lot of states in the tax burden side, but quite frankly, we've got a lot of work to do on the spending side. We've got a lot of work to do in actually, reducing the number of bureaucrats that we have in these states. My whole, Russ Vought came up with a brilliant sort of way to think about this, which is, don't think about it in terms of money spent. You talk about $50-100 billion. What does that even mean to your average person? Not a lot, but you can think about the fact that one in 20 people in your average Republican state are employed by the state and local governments. 1 in 20. Wow. That is a massive, and it doesn't need to be that high. I mean, I'm not talking about police officers. We're not talking about firemen. We're talking about bureaucrats that are living off public dollars. Their job is to take away your freedom. Their job is to regulate you into oblivion. And by simply reducing the head count, just definitionally, you will have fewer intrusions into liberty and freedom in your state. That's our mission. That's what we do. And that's what, we've got some work going in Louisiana, but our goal is, in Republican-led states, red states, to work with those governors, state legislatures, to actually make these easy. These are not complicated reforms overall. We're not asking, we don't need to move mountains. These are simple reforms that we can make that we can solve these problems.
A couple quick questions to unpack, because you've given a lot of good things to think about, and I'd like to underline and highlight some things. But first off, you're the founder of the Leadership Initiative, correct? That's a tongue twister, by the way. I keep wanting to say initiative first because initiative is is like a beginning word, so to speak. But I guess leadership is even more important than that. But when did you start this organization? And like I said, you're the founder, correct?
Yeah, so we got founded it was in February of last year, so right after Trump got inaugurated. And we think that, we got founded because, so I've been working in state politics around the country for the last 15 years or so. And what I have seen, day in, day out, every state has an incredible community of grassroots leaders that work so hard to reform, to make sure that we elect patriots, at all levels of government. We have people who put in the time to actually get hard bills passed, and they do all of this work, and then you elect someone and they disappoint you almost every time. Well, we tried to solve the problem of why people are constantly disappointed. And so one of the things that kind of gets to one of the structural problems that is really holding up red states is that there is a shadow government, is what we call it. And if you go to our website, you can read our shadow government reports, easy reading. We have uncovered a network of NGOs whose job it is to federalize state government bureaucracies. So what does that mean? So if you are the health department in the state of Louisiana, health department in every state is usually the largest employer. It's usually, a top employer, but it's almost universally the largest expenditure by far in the state. There are national associations that set all of the best practices for how the Louisiana Department of Health operates. So if you go in and you look at, so I can do this for any aspect of government. You can look into a state government bureaucracy, so Department of Health, and you will find that they are undertaking certain activities that are really antithetical to Louisiana values. Why is that? Because the best practices that are set by these national associations of state bureaucrats take California policy and implement it in Louisiana. These are policies, to give you an example, a lot of red states will have, as a best practice, they will implement, DEI metrics in state government, even when the states passed anti-DEI legislation, for instance. State of Indiana did this national effort to under Biden to force state Medicaid programs to reimburse healthcare providers at lower rates if their employee base wasn't diverse enough. So essentially forcing, these healthcare, doctors' offices, et cetera, if you want to, get reimbursed for Medicaid dollars, you have to go ahead and implement these practices. So, these are things that are undermining, another good example in the state of Texas, just next door to you guys, so they have Department of Transportation. It's another massive department, in every state. Every state in America, including Louisiana, has an office in the Department of Transportation that, awards grants for highway contracts on the basis of race and sex. So it's minority business programs to receive Department of Transportation dollars. These have been going on for 30 years. But why does that exist? Because the National Association of Transportation Officials made this a best practice, and then every state implemented it. So you end up with, deeply embedded, practices and policies that implement um, um, California bureaucratic priorities in red states, and this happens across the board. So we call this the shadow government. Our objective is to either, force these organizations, and we've already had a lot of success in getting these organizations to back out of this crazy stuff, or getting states to simply withdraw. So these are associations of state bureaucrats. These are membership associations that every state, Louisiana included, pays membership dues to. You can simply stop paying membership dues to these associations and prevent bureaucrats from getting California ideas for Louisiana.
So what I'm hearing, for every agency they have in a state, there is a national organization that says, hey, come join us and we'll help you improve your agency in your state. And so the agencies join this national, national department kind of thing. And then the national department is usually led by some left-wing organization that basically indoctrinates them and say, hey, if you have some of this DEI stuff in your organization, it'll work more efficiently because of this. And then they train a bureaucrat to say, hey, this is how you do it, and this is why it's be efficient, even though it may not be efficient. They're trained on a national level with this organization to implement these, for bureaucracy to implement these rules and regulations, circumventing the laws on a state level, much like what happens in our federal bureaucracies, where these federal agencies often do, regulations that circumvent our Constitution without going through Congress. Is that what I'm hearing?
It's exactly, you put it exactly correctly. So every single, and when I say every single department of Louisiana, like literally every single one. So there's a National Association of Department of Motor Vehicles Administrators. Like DMVs have a national association for DMVs. State parks have a National Association of State Parks. And so what does that do? Well, you can go to pretty much any state park in America. So talking about state parks, not national parks, state parks. And you'll find like a land acknowledgement that, this park is on stolen land. You'll find these in like Kansas. It's like, why is Kansas doing this? Because that was a national program of the, National Association of State Parks. And that, and they brag in their annual report that, they have gotten, something like 90% compliance with this initiative to get these land acknowledgements placed in every single state park in America. So it's pervasive. It's literally every single agency. They are uniformly far left. So it's not like, one association is super far left and the other one's just sort of moderate left. No, they are all, by at least what I consider to be far left, every single one of them. And by far left, I'm talking about implementing policies that are, antithetical to any single red state. If you were to go talk to your average voter and you told them they were doing this, they would be appalled. So let me give you an example of how ingrained and how pernicious this is. So if you go on our website, we've got a report specifically for the state of Georgia, and we put this out just as an example. The state of Georgia, had a Medicaid provider renewal. So it's a massive contract that goes to insurance companies to administer the state's Medicaid program. We're talking over 10 years, it's multi-billion-dollar contract. Department of Medicaid oversees that provider renewal exercise. So they put out a RFP. Healthcare providers come in and, submit, have to submit paperwork to say, we're qualified to do this. But they, the bureaucracy, not the governor's staff, the bureaucrats, a lot of these guys aren't even political appointees. These are just, these are career people, put out an RFP, like list of questions they all have to fill out. How would you handle certain situations? One of those questions was, how would you handle a minor coming in saying that they were considering transitioning their gender, and would you notify the parents? Well, the correct answer for the purposes of the RFP was contrary to Georgia state law. And the answer to that question what made the difference in who got that contract, multi-billion-dollar contract. And this is a scandal. It's being litigated. It's still in litigation because it affected the outcome of a multi-billion-dollar. But who came up with that contract? The National Association of the Medicaid Directors. So like when I tell you like these are like, you're thinking like, well, this is like, small ball. No, these are like serious, like these guys are the bureaucrats of state government, have the purse strings. Like the legislature can say this is the law, but within the law, because they don't usually break the law, but within the law, they have tremendous discretion at how they implement this stuff. And that discretion is the currency of the shadow government. If you give these guys discretion, they will implement policies that are antithetical to your state. And so we've got to fix this. There's a lot of ways to fix this. One of them, as it relates to Medicaid directors, the answer is to withdraw from the National Association of Medicaid Directors. They got founded, when Obama was in office. That's one that, state of Louisiana needs to withdraw from that. But, every single one of these, some of them are harder to withdraw from others. The National Association of Insurance Commissioners, insurance is a state-run enterprise. Like it is,
Right.
It's one of the few areas of commerce that the federal government has left to the states. It is completely governed by the states, except the National Association of Insurance Commissioners is $150 million a year quasi-government, but private entity that effectively nationalizes insurance practices through the National Association. So they have been around for about 100 years. So
Wow.
They have ingrained themselves into state law in every single state in America. So like getting rid of them is very challenging because they get, I believe they get majority of their revenue through like fees for insurance contracts at the state level is how they get funding.
And I'm sure these membership fees are probably in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from a state.
Yeah.
And so I can only imagine how much money a state could save withdrawing from all the national organizations that they're members of.
So yes, you would save a lot of money, but to me, it's not even about the money. It's like the consequence of being part of these organizations. Like you can save tens of millions of dollars easy by withdrawing from all of these. But to me, the real benefit is your state is no longer being forced into California policy as a baseline. And what if a governor says, hey, I don't want to implement California policy, and they're like, well, I'll give you an example. Why does, again, I mentioned Department of Transportation, Texas, I don't know the size of Louisiana's, I'd have to look it up, but Texas has like a 30 or 40 person DEI office that does nothing but administer grants on the basis of race for highway funds, for highway grants program.
How was that created in Texas?
Every state in America has it. Louisiana has this. Wisconsin has this. It's national. Like every single state has this. And like you can go Google it. It's
is it a federal program that got initiated?
Yeah. So part of this is, so I think the Trump administration is working on getting rid of this, but it's like, yeah, so anyway, every state has this, state of Texas, it's like 30 to 40 people. Governor Abbott um, put out like a anti-DEI thing, like we're not going to do this anymore in the state of Texas. A year later, so this is spring of last year's, right when we were getting started, a Texas legislator had a hearing and brought in, the head of the Department of Transportation, and was like, so, here's the text of Governor Abbott's, no DEI policy, and here is the Texas Department of Transportation's DEI office, and here's what they do, which is administer money contracts on the basis of race. And it was incredibly embarrassing. The guy's like, well, we're gonna change it. So what they ended up doing is they changed the name. They didn't get rid of the office. The office still exists. And like, these are deeply embedded best practices that are tricky for states to withdraw from. They've just been around forever. There's companies, entire cottage industries have been created to receive these grants. And like, these are like, we're talking like, this is like literally, you only qualify for these funds if your race is X. And like, to me, like, that's a massive problem. And so, we're working on trying to resolve that. But you can kind of go down the list. Like, these programs, are created because of these national associations. And we've got to hold them to the fire. We've really got to work at solving these issues. If you want to get a handle on your red state bureaucracies, and red states have massive bureaucracies. And I think that every single position, my thesis on this is every single person you fire results in every person in your state being a little bit more free. And, like, we can compound these wins. And
repeat that, please.
Every single person, every single bureaucrat you fire results in every single person in your state being a little bit more free.
I love it. Now I want to pick up right here, but I want to go backwards for a couple seconds on a couple things you said earlier that I think are going to be really important for the listeners to know more about. And when we pick up here, maybe now might be a time to transition into that Florida thing that we had talked about earlier. But before you started the State Leadership Initiative, and you said you're working in state governments, did somehow or another, like, all of this, you started seeing all of these things, and then it kind of jumped out at you, and then you started connecting dots? Was that your aha moment to start the State Leadership Initiative? And then you kind of zoned in on, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so you started zoning in on it. Is that kind of can you tell us about that aha moment? And then I have one more question before we go to Florida.
Yeah. So my last job before I founded State Leadership Initiative was I worked for the State Financial Officers Foundation, which is the National Association of privately funded. Is an organization of state treasurers, auditors, controllers. So it represents conservative treasurers, conservative auditors, conservative controllers across the country. So John Fleming's a member, worked with him quite a bit in his office. But so most Republican state treasurers end up being a member of the association. So that organization was first founded in 2012 or 2013 and was created because the National Association of State Treasurers, which was the quote unquote nonpartisan, every state treasurer in America was a member of it, started to politicize state finance. And so what they started doing was saying that we're going to use state dollars to invest in funds that maybe push for clean energy, or maybe we'll invest in companies that have, make DEI a priority. So they started using state pension funds and other state monies to push for these issues. And group of treasurers like, hey, this is not our purpose. So they started a separate organization that really focused on fighting for nonpartisan best practices of just like, let's invest for the like well-being of the state, not like global, like weird, like objectives. So, kind of from that perch, I got exposed to this sort of community. And what I really started learning from there was, it's not just state treasurers. They were just happened to be the only organization or the only group of people, because they're elected. So like these are people who have like a duty to their citizens. I realized that every other state government sort of office had an association similar, but they like represent not like, an elected official, they represent bureaucrats. And so like Medicaid directors oftentimes are like not even, they may be technically politically appointed, but they're not like seen as political.
Right.
These are people who sort of rise up from the ranks of, the career staff. And, so like when you see like National Association of Medicaid directors, like these people are not representing the interests of the elected officials of the state. They represent career bureaucrats. And, and you find that like there's literally one for everything. And so like that's how I came to be aware of this. And again, it's one of those weird things, so we'll go talk to heads of like state agencies. They don't know about these associations. Like to give you like, they don't even know they're like members, like they have no idea. And because they don't ever go, Republicans don't ever go, because it's like, Republicans get elected, they're going to do the job. Democrats love to go to these things because they see the value and the power that can come from organizing entire agencies for, they may view it as like, these are not evil people, but they are some maybe are, but like overwhelming, they're not evil people, but they see the power in coordinating. They see the power in like creating best practices. Like the fact that it is a best practice to administer transportation funds to people who have a certain race, like that's a best practice.
Yes.
That's crazy. That's un-American. But nevertheless,
it's unconstitutional.
Like, it's unconstitutional. It's illegal, like whatever. But it's nevertheless been the best practice of the land for the last 50 years.
Kind of like the NFA and the ATF, banning things like silencers and hand braces and things, and it's unconstitutional, but it's a bureaucratic agency. They get to do it.
Exactly, and that's how they do it across the board. That's how ESG, environmental and social governance. It is a method of investing not for the best rate of return, but for environmental objectives or for the reason that was allowed to happen was not because someone said, let's just go do this. What they did was they made it a consensus best practice, and then everyone does it together. And because they all do it together, they are granted incredible leeway to get away with doing things. And so
when everybody's jumping off the bridge, it becomes legal.
I mean, yeah, like when every single, if you have everyone adopting, and they don't just like do it, they write and they create these like, they'll write white papers about this, and they'll like be law review articles about this, and they'll be in scientific journals about how this is like the right thing. And then and then when you sue and say like this, and then what do? Well, they don't say, well, gosh, we're racially discriminating. They'll say, no, like this is a consensus best practice that if you look at, this law review article from 15 years ago, and then this scientific study showing that this is the right approach for the, for whatever. And then you end up with, and the courts will defer to the best practice more often than not. And so what we're doing is calling BS on these best practices, saying like, no, like this is not okay. This is un-American. Even if it's not illegal, it's not something that red states should be doing. And so, kind of getting back to the speech I gave to you guys, what and this is really, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but effectively this was all the creation of Woodrow Wilson. They created a national bureaucratic class that rules America, and they do it. They are given incredible leeway by elected officials. And in many cases, these bureaucrats, maybe not individually, but collectively, are far more powerful than the people that we elect. And what we are doing is, we're calling out the fact that, sorry, I don't care how long you've been doing this, America is not meant to be run by bureaucrats.
I have a question.
Yeah,
so
please.
I have a couple questions, a couple things that I want to rapid fire at you here in a minute. But one, like for somebody might say, well, how are these bureaucrats getting away with it? How are the agencies getting away with it? How is our government getting away with it? If the government creates a law that makes a DEI hire illegal, how are they getting away with it? Would you say that because government has gotten so big that these things go unnoticeable? Or is it what we talked about earlier, that there's so many agencies and departments that are just kind of automatically adopting these rules and these regulations from the national organizations, and they're kind of sneaking it in, and government's so big and politicians are more worried about their next reelection that that this goes unnoticed? Because I know your organization is the one that's pointing it out. How would you answer that question? Then I'll move to my next question.
Yeah, so I think that this. So if you're a Republican governor and you want to solve some of these problems, in my last sort of kind of answer, I was talking about courts will just defer to this, oftentimes, because it's, sort of created as a best practice that has a lot of, there's so much writing on all of these, they write them in these prestigious institutions, and they sort of create this echo chamber where this is considered the right thing. So if you're a Republican governor and you want to solve this problem, what happens is, so you'll say, I want to withdraw from this association. They will come and tell you. So by the line bureaucrats that actually go to these conferences, and you need to remember too, these conferences end up being like a source of the best vacation these guys get all year is going to these conferences. They're all at Ritz-Carltons in Florida or California or wherever. And, you end up staying a week, but you only go to a few meetings. So the bureaucrats actually like going to this from it's huge. It's a huge, there's a lot of they get personal stuff out of it too. But, so first of all, the bureaucrats will lose their mind. So they'll say, this association allows me to coordinate with my counterparts in other states to be able to effectively administer federal rules. They will say this association gives me, it shows us how to solve problems that we can't figure out, just in our state. They will say you can't achieve XYZ, objective without cooperating with other states. And so the line bureaucrats will report that to the political appointees they report to, and the political appointee will say, gosh, Governor, this is going to cause a huge problem if we withdraw. And so they create this so a governor can do it, but every single time you do it, it causes a massive issue. I'll give you an example related to Louisiana. I know that State Freedom Caucus guys and a lot of others tried to withdraw Louisiana from the American Library Association. Okay. You'd think that would be an easy thing to do. But every time that a state tries to withdraw from the American Library Association, you end up with every single librarian in the state will be up in arms saying, if we withdraw, it's going to be catastrophic. And it creates this massive, so point being,
the governor doesn't care about libraries and people reading. He wants people to be,
exactly.
ignorant.
Yeah. It's what does the Library Association have to do with operating a library? It doesn't. But there's a massive constituency for all of these associations that creates political friction anytime you want to withdraw. So whenever we talk about this, so we've got bureaucrats that are just we're going to lose our minds. The point being, I'm not saying that 100% of their concerns are false, but most of it is it's the same problem you run into when you want to cut spending. You know, someone's going to lose out on that dollar. You know, someone's receiving that dollar and benefiting from that dollar of spending you want to cut. And so when you talk about cutting, you end up getting a lot of people mad. This is what Elon ran into nationally. So anyway,
the bureaucrat doesn't get to go to his Ritz-Carlton vacation once a year, where he gets a paid vacation to sit at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
Two more quick points, and then we'll move to Florida real quick. And I'm only because I'm watching the time, and I know at the top of the hour you got to go. But earlier, you pointed out how red states. I'm going backwards at the beginning of our interview, which I still think is really interesting, that red states seem to have some of the largest bureaucracies. And even though most of the red states are going tax-free, where they're getting rid of income tax, and they're doing great. Red states are doing so well these days with by lowering taxes and getting rid of income taxes. I can't help but think how much better they would be if they also got rid of the size of bureaucracy and reduced it. But also in connection with that, you talk about how red states have some of the highest charity, like especially when it comes to Medicaid. Now, not that that's charity, but some people look at it as charity. But it amazes me that there's that kind of dichotomy, if you will. And after you answer that, I have one more about blue states, but I'll let you answer that first.
Yeah. So a couple things. So yes, red states have lower taxes, but they oftentimes have larger bureaucracies. So, I mean, there's a couple things there. First of all, red states, it kind of goes to like, the Laffer curve, like you can reduce taxes and you'll end up with more revenue. Like that is true. So like, if you want to actually increase state government revenue, lowering taxes is actually a good way to do it. Because the economy just grows naturally and you end up with more to tax. So that is an accurate, economic theory that's proven itself in red states. Red states, a lot of the reason that the size of government, if you will, is so large is because of Medicaid. Medicaid is welfare. I mean, it is healthcare for lower income Americans. Red states have huge percentages of their population on these programs. That is representative of the fact that these red states receive massive percentage of their revenue from federal funding. To give you an example, so Louisiana, I'm looking at a chart right here.
You would think it's the other way around. You would think the Democrat states are the largest in welfare.
Yeah, no, they're not. So Louisiana's 37% of its budget comes from federal funds.
Wow.
Now, and like to give you an idea too, where does Louisiana place? So Louisiana has more state employees per capita than Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey. Like y'all's bureaucracy for state government employees is larger than like a lot of blue states. You guys are actually about average on the state employee side, but to give you an idea, like, there's a lot of, you guys definitely could be doing better, but you guys are actually about average. Yeah.
Earlier you said you help red states, but it sounds to me like a blue state probably needs a lot of help, but not so much even if red states have bigger government, then I see why you're focusing on red states. And if blue states tend to have less government or less welfare, like in their Medicaid system, but if a blue state came to you and said, Noah, what can you do to help us? It sounds like there's an opportunity there to help them be even more efficient, based on the fact that they have, less government than some red states.
Yeah, I mean, if they wanted to reach out, I'd be happy to. I don't think that they're not interested. And it's not, again, like it's not that blue states are efficient or anything. I do think though that for a long time the left actually did take governance seriously. So, and I think that um, whereas the left focuses on policy, or sorry, the left focuses on um, the left focuses on like actual governance. So like they focus on like the details. Like this is why like they run all of the election systems in every state. Like this is why they run the university. Like they focus on process. They focus on like governance. Our side focuses on policy. So we do big policy initiatives. So like we lower taxes. We pass gun laws. We pass laws defending life. Like we legislate, they govern. And so they take like our side does not focus on governing ever. Like other than like DeSantis, like what governor is known for like actually getting under the hood and like actually solving these problems? It's almost unheard of. And like that's not, like that's like it's just sort of our nature. Like we want to create like, the best in, framework, and then like we think the results will follow, and they often do. But when it comes to like I'm not like our focus on policy is a good thing that we have like achieved a lot from, but we have got to at the same time focus on we have got to focus on the actual back end of government, and because so many of the decisions that actually matter to people are made there. And so that's why we focus on that. That's why we focus on those issues. And yeah.
And a minute ago, you mentioned DeSantis. I'd like to give you a couple of minutes to talk about what you're working on in Florida. I think that's really interesting that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So some of the biggest, which shouldn't be surprising if you think about it, one of the biggest growth areas of government in the country is local governments. And particularly over the last half decade, maybe last 6-7 years. So the real estate price boom that is, oftentimes discussed, who's the biggest beneficiary of that? Local governments, because in most areas, most states, the localities, so the counties or cities, their biggest revenue driver are property taxes. Property taxes are way up over the last half decade. And so local governments have received just absolute windfalls. And they're not using that money like, they're spending that money on growing the size of government.
We need more lawnmowers. We need more trucks to pull on. We need more another person.
Well, if only. It's usually we need more buildings, and we need more, fancy like subscriptions. And so, so Governor DeSantis has been cutting the size of Florida state government for the last, since he's been in office. So he's been cutting the size of government in the state, but the localities have been increasing dramatically. And so what he created a Florida Doge initiative, and they've been going after local governments, cutting waste. They're not like actually focused on fraud. They're cutting like, you guys are just spending money you shouldn't be spending. And so the Florida Doge, I want to give them a massive shout out. We've been able to take a small role supporting their work, but they have done an incredible job exposing and reining in, with the goal of DeSantis's goal. One of his parting gifts to Florida, he wants to be to lower property taxes across the board. And like going after local government size is how you can achieve that. I think that what they've been doing there is really impressive, and it's something that you really can do. There's so much local, like people think local government's probably the best run. It's not. Like these like local governments are just, depends, because there's a lot of them. A lot of local governments don't have a lot of money, but if you're in a well-off area, your local government's probably getting a lot of money. because the property taxes in a lot of places have gone up because property values have risen. And in Florida, it's been an explosion. So anyway, so our work with them has been, we've been having a lot of fun working with them on that.
And are you at the same time you making connections with all these national organizations and policies that may have snuck into their local governments that are costing them money?
Yes. So we are, part of our objective and our goal for the rest of the year is there's going to be a lot of new governors next year, not just in Florida, but in a lot of, there's a lot of new governors going to be coming in. Our goal is to work with the new incoming governors and to give them the policy framework that they need to be able to just implement a lot of these cuts before the bureaucrats can get their hooks in them. So that's our objective for the next 6 months.
Well, I've got one last question before I let you go, but I want to make sure that announce everybody. I'd love to have you on again, Noah. You're absolutely amazing. You've got tons of information. But one last question for you, and if we can answer this quickly, because I know you got to go. Where do you think we're losing freedom the fastest and the most in America?
I think that we are losing freedom. I think that the future of freedom in America requires state and local governments to lower their dependency on the federal government. State governments in particular are grant administrators for the federal government. That's how you should think of your state government. They are a grant administrator for the feds. They implement Medicaid. They implement federal education policy through the local schools. They implement, effectively, they're grant administrators. We need to stop that practice and make states able to govern the way that people in Louisiana want the Louisiana government to be run. The best bulwark of freedom is a strong federal government to be able to push back against the feds, but also to be able to guarantee liberties for your citizens. And so that's how I'd answer that question is by saying we need you to we need conservatives to take ownership of their state, reduce dependency on federal government so that you can chart your own future.
I love it. Noah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be on. It was an honor. Thank you so much for having me. And I would love to come back on.
Noah, hang on one second while I ask the audience to please share this message, especially if you know somebody that's working in a local or state government. Share this message with them as a way to kind of say, hey, the fraud, the waste, it's in there. Contact the State Leadership Initiative. Go to their website, find out how they can help you. I am giving a plug for you there, Noah, because I love your work and I want other people to be exposed to it. Thank you so much. My next show is coming up soon.
Thank you.